Welcome, everybody, to Generation Dan, the only podcast that you will not want to use spark notes for. I am at the Snowback. I'm a millennial. Who else is here with me?
Your audio immediately went to shit.
Oh,
Figure that out, please.
okay.
I'm Dino the Genetic Marvel, and as you can see, I am a curmudgeonly old bastard. Our guest today is Amma Marfo. Hi, Amma. Welcome.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Fantastic. Listen, I only read my first 1,000-page book when I was like 27. And that's excluding like textbooks, Bible, crap like that. Those don't count because those were under duress. I had to. Otherwise, I was either, beaten or got bad grades, which also resulted in a beating. Not a fan. And, luckily I ended up being a giant and then that stopped. And then like, well, don't be stupid. I'm like, I don't want that either. It's horrible. Yeah, we missed half of the entire intro. No, well, that's the thing is I had to read. So being raised very religious, I had to read a lot of stuff because I was religious. So that kind of takes over everything. And by the time you're done all that, you're like, I don't want to read for fun. That shit sucks. Right. So,
yeah.
Like, I remember, like, I'm a huge nerd and like, I love Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And I remember I went into for a book that it was like, oh, you could choose whatever fiction book you want. And I was like, cool. I went to the library. I'm like, I don't know. I want something exciting. And she was like, you should try The Hobbit. I got 3/4 of the way down the page and I'm like, who wrote this? Like, what are you talking about? This isn't even in English,
The guy who was at the Battle of the Somme. That's who wrote The Hobbit.
Right. And then you're like, well, that explains it, but also get out of here, right? So
yeah.
Hi, Victoria. So reading is awesome. That's my wife. She's a nerd. And I make fun of her all the time for it because she's
right.
Like,
be nice to Victoria.
She's not wrong, but don't tell her she's right. Listen, you're gonna ruin my whole day. That's not
Okay. Well, for people who haven't figured it out yet, we're talking about the best and the worst of the books we had to read in school, because that is just a part of being in English class. Is like, all right, we're reading this novel, and then you compare that shit when you get to college, and it's very interesting having those conversations. Scary? Who's scary?
I mean, Murderface. I'm scary. That's fine. That's okay. Silmarillion and Watership Down is my fave. That's because you're a nerd. That's fine. Don't worry. Look behind.
Oh, the Dachshund painting? That one?
Or doesn't matter. See, this is the thing though, is as well, like there are such better ways to communicate or entice people to read, right? Like
I think.
Well, this is the thing. Is Brave New World, 1984. Those are books that I had to read in school, right?
Yes.
And those are awesome books. But when a teacher goes, so this is about, things being crazy and, being very strict. And you're like, I don't want to read that, man. I'm here. This is about my life. I don't want that. Right. And then they're like, oh, no, it's about more than that. And you're like, it's really expanded to a whole bunch of things. So, but I don't know. Atlas is an English teacher, so I can only imagine the kind of shenanigans that he goes through.
Yeah. So
the power you must have.
Well, they want you to teach dystopia when you have the seniors.
Thank you.
And the options we have are 1984, Brave New World, and The Handmaid's Tale.
Okay.
Now, I was okay with doing Brave New World or The Handmaid's Tale. I will not do 1984, and that is for one specific reason, and that is I had to read that book 3 times for school.
How?
Not because I sucked at it. In 10th grade, in English class, we had to read it for school. I switched schools. In 11th grade, I had to read it for school at my new school.
I mean, by the end of it, you should have been like a pro. You're like, I got this. It's no...
And I went to college and had to read it for school. I am not touching that book ever again.
No.
Well, like, that's the problem with something like that. Like, that's a book that you can read multiple times and get more out of it, which makes it more frustrating, right? Like,
like especially with something that, like some of the best books that I read, like the ones that I really liked, it's like you could read it at a different point in your life and you get something new from it every time. Like it's almost 100%. A new book every time. Although now I'm curious, like if that is like the canon of dystopia, like Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, is it?
Yes,
And, like,
great book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, why is that not also a choice?
We actually considered that at my school, but we didn't have the like. Me and the other English teacher who had the seniors this year were like into the idea, and then it just never really went anywhere. And then also we would have had to order it for the school.
Mm.
Yeah.
Another caveat of this is last year they were like, "Hey, do you want any new books for like in circulation?" And as a joke, I put in Snow Crash, which is another dystopia that has themes of like corporatocracy and is the first recorded instance of the metaverse, probably.
Mm.
And I was like, that kind of fits with modern day, society. And I didn't think we were gonna get it. And then they were like, "Hey, Snow Crash came." And I was like, "Oh shit, cool." So that's what I'm doing this year.
Okay. I think everyone will find this entertaining. Was last year when Atlas had it was the which one was it? It was which class was it just the regular English one where they got to choose a book? And I was like, what you should do is have them debate which book, have them go through like a whole discussion and like produce a decision, like the class has decided. And then you go, that's great. We're doing this. This isn't a democracy. That's the lesson. Because like what better lesson to learn than like, oh, you have no power. Sucks to be you.
I was going to do that, but we took so long on the book before what would have been the dystopia that I had to cut the dystopia and move straight onto Othello because you got to do Shakespeare also.
I feel like you could have done it where you're like, I have an option of like 3 books, and like one of them is like a graphic novel where they're going to be like, oh yeah, we'll go with the graphic novel, and you're like,
go with the comic.
No, and just ruin their life. Yeah, I agree. 1984 was good. Animal Farm is fantastic. Even
Also
Lord of
good.
the Flies, I found like there's a lot of
got
books
that
like
in
that where like, but you don't. I feel like you don't realize the significance of those stories too, because let's be honest, high school, we're basically all idiots. There's no like
Aces.
everyone's thinking with their genitals at that point. There's no real knowledge happening, right? People, like school is there just to make sure everyone doesn't do stuff while their parents are away. You're like, you're in a controlled environment. You can't do anything, right?
Pretty much.
Which makes sense. Otherwise, you'd have a lot more young parents. That's not a healthy situation. But it's that's true though. Like even you can go back and read stuff. Like I like to read something I read regularly is Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Oh,
How to Win Friends. It's a great book. Well, it's because it's the whole idea of trying to not force malice and just establish that people are just incompetent. And they don't hate you, they're just stupid. And that's just like, because I'm like, so I was raised with the idea that someone who's dumb but wants to know, you should exercise more patience and more care to help them get over that hurdle. Like that's a beneficial thing. Have the discussion, right? That's a worthwhile thing. But someone who's willfully ignorant is like, no, I don't want to learn. Yeah, that person can go to hell. Who cares? They're a waste of anything, right? So exactly. So that idea where you can go through things again and just try and understand that, like, there's number one, always a different perspective, but also two is it's valid in their eyes. So if you come in and unvalidate their experience, they're not going to listen to anything. We say, okay, can you explain to me? Maybe I'm wrong. Take that on yourself, and then they explain to you. You go like, oh, okay, so you're dumb. Listen, what about this stuff? And then you present it a different way, right? So, Skibidi Toilet. I don't know what those mean, man. Come on. Love Dale Carnegie. Thanks for well, you're welcome, Victoria. If only
that's so weird to me that like it sounds like you would not run into each other very often, and this just happened. You live together. She's upstairs.
Oh yeah. No, she's like 20 feet that way. So
it's like, thanks for recommending this book, and it's like, you're welcome.
Basically. Well, that's so the funny thing is I would buy copies and give them to people, and they would never read it. So and then that was a learning experience too, where you're going, oh, if you really want to learn how to communicate and understand people better, you should get this book. They're like, oh yeah. And if you do, great. If you don't, that's on you. I can't force you to learn. I'm not going to let it collect dust just because I'm going to spend $13 on a book because a nice person. That's a lie. I'm not. I just,
you got to pick shorter books to give to people. Like my go-to book to give to people is the Diaries of Adam and Eve by Mark Twain, which is basically he wrote like the Diaries of Adam, so like what it was like in that era, and then there's a second book, the Diaries of Eve, of like what happened when she then came in and like how they interact with each other. It's so funny, very sweet, but it's short. Like you got to give people short books.
Yeah.
And there's pictures. So at least my copy has pictures.
I have like almost an entire library of comic books and graphic novels. So I'm all for the pictures and like I it's great. The problem is like this whole shortening everything has backfired on all of us because I can't watch anything. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to watch this little short film. And then I'm like, oh, no, focus. And it's just, like it's, I don't know. Weird.
This so recently they made a musical of The Great Gatsby now that it's public domain on Broadway that I am so in love with, and I cannot wait until it comes to LA so I can go see it at the Pantages. That said, I was talking about it to my creative writing class, and I was like, have you guys ever read the book for school? And they're like, no, we haven't. And then this one girl was like, who had come into the school mid-year, was like, we were reading that in my English class, and I never got to finish it. And I was like, that's good enough reason for me. I bought a copy for myself, copy for her. Here you go. Because anybody who's like, that is a high school student that's like, I want to read a thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Keep doing that.
Yeah.
And I like after rereading it, because I read it in school, I was like, wow, Nick is really gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's really gay. I did not catch that the first time.
I mean, I read it for school in Florida, so they were never going to tell us that, but like, yeah.
That's fair.
That scene with the McKees in the apartment, oh, there is no way something didn't happen. Like that. Jeez.
It's like, no, you're in love with him. Like, just, it's like 3/4 into every rom-com you've ever seen. It's like, listen, you're in love with him. You always have.
Okay. Yeah. No, I actually remember one of our our second date. We actually walk around chapters, Victoria and I, and we're looking at books and stuff. And I told her my favorite book that I had read at that point was To Kill a Mockingbird, because I was like, it's a great book. And I'm like, and he's a badass, and he's just like, I don't have to prove I'm a badass. I just am a badass. I'm like, that's fantastic. I'm like, that's exactly the life I'd like to live. He was like, but you have to become a lawyer. I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. That's no. I'm holding on to every shred of soul I can possibly hold on to that I still have after my first divorce. I don't want to.
It's like, you know how many more books you have to read to become a lawyer? Just so you know.
Well, and also, too, then you have to, like, someone's going to be like, you should put Esquire at the end of your name. And you're like, I don't need any sort of degree. I can just put that on my name. And I'm fine.
Sometimes I bought a ticket to something in the area, and they're just like, you can put in a suffix. Nobody checks. You could be an Esquire wherever you want.
Listen, I'm a doctor of scatology. It's the study of shit. Ta-da! And I am a pro. As a fat guy, this is just scientific. Sorry. But yeah.
Is there like a thing? Like I know with if you do that with like military stuff, you have the whole stolen valor thing. That doesn't really happen with anything else, does it? They're like, oh, you weren't a doctor? Okay.
Yeah, because all the rest of the titles are actually me. Like, listen, how many people have you known that are like, I'm a doctor? You're like, oh, where do you practice? You're like, oh, no, it's a doctor of literature. And you're like, that's not a doctor. You have a doctorate.
Yeah, you have doctorate.
That's a thing. But don't come around here going, call me doctor. I'm like, I'll smack you in the face. That's you're ridiculous, right?
I've never seen anybody do that for a PhD of like history or something. You're just like, okay, that's.
Look, it's that whole thing. I remember talking with friends of mine who were doing masters and stuff, and I was like, so what is it that you're doing? They're like, oh, I'm studying this. And I'm like, how is that applicable to anything? They're like, it's not really. And I'm like, so you're a master of something that's useless? They're like, basically. And I'm like,
more or less.
Well, why? And I'm like, why not do something different? They're like, well, this is what I could do. And I'm like, yeah, this is confusing to me. Like, I went to college. I'm like, I went to college and then worked. That's what I did. And now I tell jokes, mostly fart jokes, because, that's what the world needs.
We're providing a service.
100%. By the way,
appreciate that.
Emma, I checked out your Instagram because I was tagging you for this show,
Yeah.
and I saw the first thing on there was that bit you have about the minivan, and I was like, "That's fantastic!"
Thank you.
It's top tier.
Thank you so much.
I have so many recorded sets that I'm like, I'm not afraid to put them on, but I'm like, I don't want to. I know how much work is going to have to go into cutting clips and everything like that, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I want to do all that. But then I'm like, you know what? Let's see what happens. So I'm like, I'm starting to work on it, trying to figure out, but like, it's. I'm a funny conversationalist. Like at a dinner party, I will have the entire table going. Put me on stage, and I'm like, I'm funny. It's okay. I'm like, I can headline, but I'm like, it's if they pay for it, I'm gonna be hilarious. But I'm like, if it's like an open mic, they're like, shut up, we're watching the game, and I'm like, the game sucks. They will lose, and they'll still be rich, and you'll still be poor. This is the whole thing doesn't make any sense. But
which I'm sure they love when you tell them that. Like that probably goes off great.
It is helpful that I'm, a giant. I'm like 6'2" and 270 pounds, so it's like I'm the size of a door or a small vehicle. So like a Lada, if I like curl down into like a yoga pose, you could be like, that's a car, It's
I was gonna say like a minivan.
Yeah, well, no. I used to be the size of a minivan. That's true.
See, I'm little. I don't have that kind of influence. They're just like, why is that large child screaming? So what do you do?
One of the like admin at my school is this woman who's like 5'4", and her voice carries like across the entire yard. Like that voice can like pick you up out of the air and pull you back to earth.
But you have to, because otherwise, like, people aren't going to listen to you. Like, I'm 5'2".
Jesus.
I remember 5'2" and a quarter, and because I thought I was 5'1" and a half, and I went to the doctor, and they're like, "You're 5'2" and a quarter." And I was like, "People better watch their tone around me." But the thing is, like, I'll meet people after doing things like this, and they're like, "Oh, we thought you'd be taller." I was like, "That just means I'm loud. That's all that is."
Yeah.
It's like, you have the voice of a woman who's 5'7". Thank you. I have to. So
That's
no,
fair.
I'm little.
Thank you. I'm average height for the time. That
And like it's consistent with my genetics. If you met my parents and I was any taller, it wouldn't make any sense. They're also little.
Oh, you know what? I had the fun thing is like I'm not like I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I'm the only one that cracked 6 feet. So like I would drive my dad around because he as he got older and everything, and I had to learn how to drive. So he's like, "Good, you're my chauffeur," and I'm like, "Yes, sir." Right? So hilariously, I would come around and they'd be like, "Who's this guy?" And my dad would be like, "Oh, it's my security." And they're like, "Oh, this is a secure facility. You don't have to worry about it." He's like, "No, it's my son." And they're like, "That's your son?" He's like, "I know, it's crazy, right?" And my mom, every time someone's like, "Oh, this is my son, Dino," and they're like, "That's your son?" She's like, "Look what I made. He's so big." And I'm like, I don't think that's a compliment, Mom.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's because everyone in my family is average height or shorter. And like even so I'm Greek. When I go to Greece, people are like, "Oh, you're a foreigner," and I'm like, "No, I'm Greek," and they're like, "No, Greeks don't come in your size. That's not that does it. There's no box option for that." I'm like, "It's accurate." Yeah, it's funny that
I'm the Colossus of Rhodes. I forgot to tell you that.
Oh, please. I like to tell this joke on stage where I'm like, if my wife and I start fighting, because she's a little taller than you, but still from my perspective, there's no one in my household I can't wear as a backpack, right? Like that's so I'm like, if we get into it, what I just do is I start grabbing things that I know she uses and just put them on high shelves around the house.
Diabolical.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not just a pretty face. I'm like, there's I am Greek. I am very tricky. So happy second Sunday of ordinary time of non-football season. Oh yeah.
And also with you.
Yeah, well, hey, that's fine. But yeah, no,
and with your spirit.
Welcome, Joey. And hello, everyone. Hiram, yeah, don't spam the chat, Hiram, because that just makes you a bad person, and then I'll block you. So don't do that. I already had to block somebody else because they're weird. See, this is I feel like there needs to be a book on the consequences of being an idiot on the internet. I feel like that would be so like someone like it's got to be a story of somebody who's like, "I'm a professional troll. I just troll everyone," and then like everybody turns on them and they have to run for their life. I feel like that would be a learning experience for a lot of people where they're like, "Wait, that's not a good thing." You're like, no, you're a horrible person. And they're like, "Well, it's just on the internet." No. It's like a drunk person. You're like, you just said what you thought. You're not, you know.
It feels like the heckling experience, right? Where it's like that person believes that they're helping, and I'm like, you're not helping. Like, I get what you're trying to do. This isn't helpful. I have a plan. Just like let me work.
Yeah. No, it's true.
How to win friends and influence people too, the internet.
I remember a friend of mine was like, these girls that I'm working with, because he's in film and not fancy. He's like in the background. He does set direct decor and everything. And he's like, a few of the girls I'm out with, one of them, her dad passed away, or her stepdad or something like that. And he goes, so we're thinking of going to a comedy show. I'm like, that's a horrible idea. And he's like, no, they want to. And I'm like, that doesn't, just because somebody wants to, doesn't mean anything. And then they proceeded to sit all the way at the front. And I was like,
no.
And he's like, hey, do you want to sit with us? I'm like, not if you paid me. And sure enough, it was a popular comedian who's actually does quite well. He's on TV and stuff. And essentially they just started interacting with him. So his entire set, and this was the second show of the night. So his entire set was just dealing with them, and they came out and they're like, oh, he wouldn't have had anything if it wasn't for us. I just look at my friend. I'm like,
that's not even a little bit true.
I'm like, if you ever bring those people out, I'm gonna beat you up. I'm gonna have to punch you in the face. He's like, no, don't. He's gentle. He's Polish, but he's very gentle as a man. Like, he's very emotional. I'm like, I'll have to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you, but if you do these kind of things, you have to be punished. And he's like, I'll be better. I'm like, please do, because these women are horrible. It's just, I can't. The idea that someone's like, oh, I'm very important to the show. You're like, you're a horrible person.
Nope.
Can you imagine somebody in real life acting like that? Like, and that's like a family member or something. You're like, oh my God, just stay at home. Don't do anything. You're not allowed out of the house anymore. That's it. Your house arrest. It's horrible.
I get the feeling if someone has to say, I'm helping. No, not.
It's there. So there was a show up here, and it was this weird show. It was always like one of the first like CGI animated shows, and it was called Reboot. And it was this.
I remember Reboot.
You remember? Okay, so
I remember Reboot.
I only thought it was in Canada. I didn't know how many people actually know this show, but
yeah, we had
one of the things was where the one kid went and made a wish that he wanted to be the smartest person. And instead of becoming smart, it just made everyone else dumb, which you're like, is so poetic. And sure enough,
that's like some monkey's paw shit. That's,
very much, right? Which you're like, every genie does that. They're like, oh, you want to be the smartest? We'll make you the smartest. Ha ha. And you're like, no, not that way. You know, I want to be the richest. Great. Everyone's poor. You're like, no, that doesn't help. You know? So he went on, because the games in this show, they're in a computer, but they don't really realize it. And they're like, the user inputs a game, and then they have to win the game. If they don't win the game, it can be catastrophic to the whole system, which you're like, great way of explaining things. It's hilarious. But all of the computer people were like, I am helping. And they're just like holding onto his legs so he can't drag. Like, he's dragging them. And he's like, you know who really needs your help? The user. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just like literally tackle him to the ground. They're like, I am helping. I am helping. You're like, see, like you said, if you have to say it, it's definitely not. It's just, you know, it's similar to, I'm in charge here. Listen.
Yeah.
Who are you letting know? Yourself? Are you reminding yourself? Because you can do that internally. You don't have to do that externally, you know? And yeah, I've had that a couple times from very incompetent people. It's always an incompetent person who's like, you know, I'm in charge. And you're like, please be in charge. I need you to be in charge. I want you to be in charge. I don't like, because we were moving stuff around, and they're like, literally grabbed half of a house. Like it was like a wood shed, and they were taking it apart. And I'm like, I grabbed half of it and then just started dragging it because, you know, I'm basically a beast of burden. And they're like, how can I help? I'm like, get out of my way. That's all I need you to do. That's you have to organize. You don't have to do that. I'm here for the heavy lifting because I'm a donkey. It's not, you know, very weird.
So Victoria asked, what was the worst book from school?
Calculus 101.
whatever chemistry textbook we had. My
probably.
God.
Yeah. Did you have a teacher that made you memorize the periodic table?
No, I stayed
Thank
away from sciences. Science is from the devil. I
had chemistry for a semester, and that was how I learned that apparently my brain has the capacity to continue writing even after I fall asleep, because I would wake up and like look at those notes and I'm like, I kept writing, but these words they can't be the words that he said. Like it was like that thing when Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec is like, I'm just going to type every word I know. And I was like, this can't be what he said. These aren't sentences, but what a skill to learn you have.
But then that's also science. You're like, yeah, none of it makes any sense. It's all see, I went into finance.
What Victoria Means was like novels.
But... No, I know.
I know she did. But listen, you know what the problem is? We all know that the real evil out there are textbooks. There's always someone to read a book, but textbooks, those are just pure, unadulterated evil. That's, because they're not written by people who are trying to communicate. They're written as somebody who's trying to document. Those are not the same things.
Yeah.
Okay? And
there's that, and then like it's always this company has a deal with the district, so this is the one you have to use and use that curriculum.
I loved in college when they're like, oh, this is my book and you have to buy it for my course. And the only place you can buy it is in the store. And it's also 7 times the price of everything else. You're like, I'll cut you, bro.
Or even worse is the professor wrote the book. You're like, fuck.
Yeah.
And so my economics class, this was the only class that I ever like flat out was like, I'm not going to go, because he was like, it's my book. And it costs like twice as much as everything. And then class was just him reading it. And I was like, I know how to read. That's how I got here. So I just stopped going. I would spend that time somewhere else, like doing the work. And my grades got better because I wasn't frustrated. And then I went to recitation, got the grade I needed to pass. And that was it. But I was like, dog, don't just read a book to me. I know how to read. That's how I got here.
Okay. Victoria says history of art was mine. It was 800-page textbook. We had to lug it to uni, and the exam was remembering paintings. See, like, so my wife is a fashion designer, so she's like, she had to learn stuff, but she's like, I didn't need that. And you're
like 800 pages of flashcards, which sounds backbreaking. I'm so sorry you didn't just get to put it down.
I mean, she is Chinese, so I feel like that's kind of her thing. She's like, ooh, 800 flashcards? It's great. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not.
Or like, I always loved in the history books when you got to the end of the year, we're like, all right, we got to speed run the rest of it because we got to go to graduation or whatever. And then you look at the end, and it's like, our world today, and it has like the Twin Towers still in the book. You're like, yeah, this isn't really accurate, is it?
Yeah. Victoria says, LOL, Amma, I did that for marketing. Yeah. It's Gamer Gurus. Can I ask you all something? You can ask. If we answer, we'll see what the question is.
We'll do our best.
This was one of those things. I had that in it was communications class where I didn't want to show up because the teacher was very small. He was a little guy, and he had this air of, well, I'm in charge here. And I'm like, you're not. You're just not. I'm paying for you to educate me. So me coming to this class is optional by me. I'm the deciding factor. And he docked me marks. And I'm like, so you docked me marks on my exam, but that person has the same answers as me and they got a better mark. He goes, yeah, but you didn't word it how I worded it in class. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not how this works. He's like, well, it is for my class. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you want to get beaten by a teenager? Because that's what's going to happen, little man. And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I mean, if you don't straighten up, I'll straighten you up. There's no problem. And that was the first time I learned that you can't talk to teachers like that. They don't really
they don't love it. No. But
I
had a calculus professor that was like that too, because I wasn't getting the way that he was explaining it. So then I ended up going to a tutor who taught me a different way to do it. Yeah. So like I would do it the way that she taught me because his wasn't working. And he's like, well, you got the right answer, but not the way I taught it. And I was like, great. I don't get the way you teach it. I've mentioned this to you several times. And now like your position has been outsourced. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Hilariously, the whole idea that math, there's a million different ways to get the answer. So the fact that you're determined that you have to do it my way is ridiculous. So you're like, that none of that makes any sense. So
yeah, it's like you have no control over you have no control over this classroom. Like, what do you want me to do? Like,
no. I see. Go ahead.
Dino's thing with his professor, where he's just a little dude, and like, did he just end all of his sentences with "Je suis Napoleon," or like, what was the like?
He wore a beret. He wore a beret. I shit you not. I shit you not.
Yes.
And he had.
This is not a man that wants to be taken seriously. I'm so
no. He also had like. He had a receding hairline, but it was also very long. So he was trying to make it a coif. And I'm like, that's not going to work. No. And then, so I've had to teach this to a lot of people, is that when you have a goatee, which is a goatee, it can be fashionable, it's fine. But if the bottom of your goatee is smaller than your lips, what that means is when you make this face, that's a butthole. You made a butthole with hair around it. Okay. You have to have it. It has to be wide for this. Otherwise, it just looks like you surrounded lips with hair. It looks weird. So, and he had like a narrow goatee, and it was spotty too. Like you couldn't grow a full beard. And I'm like, bro, are you like not even old enough to be here? Like, how are you a teacher? It was very alarming.
I just love the idea of him in the mirror with like a brown marker at the beginning of the morning. Okay, fill it in.
Just filling it in.
Okay, there we go. Now I got a full beard.
Like, I'll be honest, this is like back in like 99, 2000. So I can only imagine how he started dressing after like Pirates of the Caribbean came out, because he had that kind of look. And I feel like he would have been like the pirate life, because he would wear like because he wasn't like, he was little, but he was stocky. So he was a little bit broad, but he would always wear like very loose fitting shirts. And I was like, what are you,
okay,
pirate?
So now I'm getting George Costanza vibes.
Oh, yeah, George Costanza, but worse. If that's
worse.
How is that possible?
Yeah. Worse in that like he taught communications, couldn't communicate. You're like, why would you like listen, if it's a math professor who can't communicate, I'm like, yeah, you can only communicate in numbers.
Where would you have learned?
He's autistic as fuck. That's fine. Just you need a translator for everybody else. No problem. But you're the communications guy. Your one job is communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know how. I don't know how to figure that out. That's very, and especially to like, I had in church, I would give public discourses, and I would like, I talked in front of 1,000 people when I was 12 years old. No big deal. I'm like, it's just words. I've never been intimidated by that kind of stuff. Like, that's my ability. And I'm like, bro, I could teach this class better than you, and I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? This was also before I read Dale Carnegie's book. So it's my communication had a lot of F words in it. Like, listen, you fucking guy, stop being fucking retarded. And you know, that doesn't go over well to people in academia.
No, it does not. When you sound like a cut character from Goodfellas, it doesn't usually go well.
I did wear a leather jacket.
I went to college in Rhode Island. Most people sound like that. And what are you gonna do?
Oh yeah. You probably had to walk around with a little knife. Just listen.
Today I'm here to present my thesis on Paradise Lost, and that Satan guy, he was wicked smart, and too smart for his own good.
Exactly. We are discussing best and worst books, Mooney.
All right, I do want to answer in the spirit of the question that was asked. So I will say, apologies to Atlas. I did not like The Great Gatsby. It doesn't like I get that I'm supposed to or whatever, but it never never worked for me. We did Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver, sophomore year of high school. And it is about this white family that goes to the Congo as part of like a religious mission. And
that sounds horrible.
So
this will go well.
Yeah. So my parents are from Africa. So that was not a fun experience for me, but also to read it under the instruction of a white woman who I did not, and to this day, do not believe is particularly smart. I was like, I hate every second of this experience. I might have enjoyed this book if it wasn't you teaching it to me, but yeah, no. There are a couple books that I think, having learned them from her, it was never gonna happen. Like anytime we have the conversation in the US about should teachers have guns, I remember the day that we like wandered in and she was like cutting her bangs over the trash can. I was like, we couldn't even trust her with scissors. Don't give her a weapon. What are you doing? So no.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's
yeah. So most things I read in her class, but we did do Great Gatsby with her, and we did Poisonwood Bible, and then I had her again senior year. So like I'm mentally on my way out, and I was like, nope, I hate this.
Fuck you, lady. Yeah.
I feel like there's a huge part of what delivery system is used, right? So like if a teacher, like they it's important that they don't try and be every person. You're like, listen, have your skill, do that, that's fine. There's like, it's because like the idea of a generalist it doesn't exist anymore, right? People's are very specific in what they know, and they do not know anything else. Like, so Atlas got married last year, so I came from Toronto, I went to LA, and we did it, and I was like, hey, do you have any recommendations, because you've lived in LA your entire life? He's like, I just go to work and go home. And I'm like, that's
all
right, bro, thank you for that.
That's real.
That's not helpful. That's not helpful at all. But you know, it's one of those things where you're like, that's just how some people are, and that's you know. Whereas for me, and I'm like, I will tell you every delicious food to get in Toronto. Why? Because I'm fat and I love food. It brings us all. Food unites everyone. Okay, if somebody doesn't like food, that's not a human being, possibly a ghost. Just letting you know.
Emma, I had, I think, the inverse experience of Poisonwood Bible, because in 10th grade, I was taught by this Jamaican woman who I was failing her class hard the first semester, because I don't know. I was just not doing any of the work, and I did the classic, what can I do to get my grade up?
Jamaican women aren't going to put up with your nonsense. Let me tell you that right now.
No.
So here's what she did. She said, I will like give you a C if you read the entirety of The Bluest Eye and do this report for me. And I was like, okay. It broke my heart. And then she's like, never do it again. And I was like, yeah, never do it again. Thanks.
She knew what was up, man.
Yeah, she definitely knew what was up. So like the opposite
to the chef. Like, hell yeah.
Yeah. No, she's cool. Miss Young, wherever you are, I hope you're doing well. So there's that, and then like another book that I really hated, not just because I think Ayn Rand is a terrible person, and but we had to read Atlas Shrugged in 11th grade, and oh my god, fuck that book so hard. Not just because that's my name, but also like it's a shit book.
Yeah.
And my teacher that year was this like very clearly
ready to retire,
libertarian, but didn't want to like show it. But this was like tipping the cards a little bit.
Well, sure.
Woman, yeah.
See, the problem
fuck
is
that lady and fuck that book.
Okay, the problem. So, Atlas Shrugged, also another book that I got 3/4 through the page. I'm like, this isn't in English. I need the English version, right? So, but also too, I'm like, my frustration is like, I'm an idiot. So if there's fancy artwork or a really cool name, like Atlas Shrugged being Greek, and I'm like, that's a fantastic title. And then I start reading, I'm like, this has nothing to do with Atlas. What are you talking about? Right. And it's just, it's very frustrating.
For people who have never read the book, and if you haven't, I applaud you. But the title comes from like, oh, if you saw Atlas shouldering the burden of carrying the sky, what would you be? I'd shrug. It's not my problem. Fuck you. I hate that book.
That's
I find it important when the
insulting to me and my culture on so many levels. It's like he held up the world, but you know, not my problem. I'm like, those are murdering words. I don't know what to do.
Definitely.
It's very
I find it important when the teacher is engaging. I remember one English teacher made King Lear so much fun to read when Cornwall and Reagan
gouge
out Gloucester's eyes.
It's gouge without the.
The teacher flung a slime in the eyeball. Amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I did King Lear the following year with a different teacher, and amazing. She was wonderful. Like we did The Awakening by what's her name? Kate Chopin, which I don't like, but I read it with a teacher who found ways to make it really engaging. So I was like, all right, I can endure this. So even a bad book with the right teacher is something you could still get something from. And then years later for a book club, I read it again, and I was like, again, it's one of those things, a book comes to you at a different time in life. Like a frustrated housewife to 16-year-olds were like, who cares? And like in your mid to late 30s and you have friends that are married, you're like, oh, you know what? I get it now. So
yeah.
sometimes you can like come back to stuff. But again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miss Allen made it engaging in a way that Miss Dickerson was fundamentally unequipped to do. So I totally get that.
And that was, I find, like only certain teachers did anyone enjoy learning Shakespeare with.
Yeah.
Like there was only like out of the 7 or 8 teachers that were in the English department, there was only 2 that made Shakespeare, I don't want to say enjoyable because it's still Shakespeare, but like an experience that you would, go, oh, that was an enjoyable experience, and it's because like it's those things could be like a novella. You don't need all that words. You're like, it's just, come on.
Well, and the thing was, like, I really like Shakespeare on my own. So, like, for me, I was like, I'm going to enjoy this. You're either making it more enjoyable or less enjoyable. So, like, the way our program worked was, like, we had 4 possible teachers you could have. I ended up with the same 2 times. So I had Miss White freshman year, junior year, and then Dickerson sophomore and senior year. And, like, it was either stuff I had already read, and then, like, you're either adding to it or you're not. Or it was something new, and I'm going to find a way to enjoy it despite you. And there was a lot of that sophomore and senior year where I was just like, I get that this is your job, and I will sit quietly to the extent that I can. And by senior year, I was no longer even willing to do that. But, like, I was like, I'm going to get something out of this despite you, woman. Like,
that's right.
Come on. So, I don't even remember when we did. I know we did a Shakespeare senior year. I don't remember what it was. What was it?
I think like with the teachers that teach Shakespeare, you either get like the older ones that are like, we are doing this just because we have always done this and you will enjoy it whether we like it or not. Or you have the people who try and teach it like, okay, this is why this is important to the modern day, not just because he came up with the phrase in a pickle. No, like if you're 15 and you're reading Romeo and Juliet, that like has a lot of crossover with what your life is currently experiencing.
Listen, the only reason that Romeo and Juliet was good was if you got to watch the movie version by Franco Zeffirelli, where you saw at least one nipple. At that, listen, that is top tier entertainment. Because everyone's running on hormone. Even the girls were like, "Hey, there's a nipple coming." Like, what? There's a nipple? Oh, Jesus! Let me wake up. Let me put some water on my face and get my seeing glasses out and just it's fine. Yeah, that's reasonable.
And then like as a senior, we did Othello, and I ended up liking it so much just because Iago is so fucking extra. That
Othello's really good. It's really good.
Seeing him in a production, like that the school did of Othello, and I was like, this is the most fun I've ever had because he's such a fucking messy bitch. And that's the kind of stuff I want to get into when I'm a senior. And then now as an adult, going back and because I taught it last year, I'm going to teach it later this year, is like if you do like a queer reading of Othello and can't have him, so he's going to ruin his life. Wow, so cool.
Seems reasonable. I mean, I think that's one of the things that people have to get better at is kind of like enticing people to read, because I think like for me, I still find it hard to read. And like I've read, like I had to read stuff for when I was a financial planner and stuff like that, where I'm like, I was taking courses and I'm like, I'm reading on the subway and people are like, what are you reading? I'm like, it's a textbook for an exam. I'm like, no, I was a fiduciary. I'm like, that's a real job. I'm like, I'm an important person. Like, not really, but
You're on the train. I put the douche in fiduciary.
100%. Oh, and I look down on every person that I see. Yeah, that's not only because I'm Greek, but because I had a real job. But I was like, you had to like, I could muscle through stuff, but I'm like, I relied on a guy who I'm no longer friends with, but I was like, he would always be like, so this story is about this happening, and you kind of see how they figure it out. I'm like, I love figuring out how things get figured out. This is wonderful. And I would just start going through it, right? And like there was always a way to I guess get people enthusiastic about it. But like now there's just so much to choose from. And then people are like, I love Twilight. You're like, that's not a book. Okay. That is a graphic novel without pictures and also gross.
Okay. The more I think about it, and like, yeah, okay, bad storytelling, 50 Shades of Grey exists because of it, blah 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 blah. But like, it's a book at least.
Is it?
Like LAUSD recently is really into like informational text and nonfiction, which is
Okay.
fine, and that makes sense for like the real world. But when you don't instill a love of reading in kids, they're just gonna, like Dino was saying, muscle through it and not want to get more information on their own. Like it really bums me out teaching the creative writing classes, and I'm like, okay, you're gonna make up a story, and they're like,
what?
They're like, how do I
what?
do that? It's
How do I do that? And I'm like, it's important for like communication and just being able to like have a conversation with someone, that like getting rid of the novels in English class is affecting the way that people communicate with each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's affecting the fact that like it's a fucking elective, man. Try and have some fun with it or something.
Yeah, and it's like, because storytelling is such, and like there's documented information on this, like storytelling being like a superior way to get across information. Like if you can construct a narrative that helps someone understand things that are more data driven, they're more likely to understand it. So I get the idea of being like, oh, you should have all this information, but give people a means by which to effectively convey it, or else what are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing, using an analogy or a story to it's so much more memorable for everyone involved. And then they're like, oh, well, also too, I can gain a little more perspective because I'm hearing it as a story. And I'm like, oh, if I was in that situation, how would I do? And you're like, you are now part of the experience, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just like, and then they went, and you're like, that's gotta stop. They can't.
Yeah, they like, for lack of a better term, I'm like, you guys have been like academically poisoned. That's not to say all academics are bad. I'm saying specifically the like data drivenness, informational text, that like it's gotten so like gray and without character that it prevents them from being able to write a fucking character.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a regular viewer, Nick Tucker. He's actually a principal at a school. He's like, teaching is a work of heart. Yuck. He's a principal. That's fair.
I read that. I think there's a book called that I had to read for my education. I am a master of education, and I read that book, Teaching is a Work of Heart. And I remember it just being like, all right, like I get where you're going, but like surely, do we have to feel this way about it? Because
now that puts the douche in fiduciary.
See, I'm a firm believer in that there are two types of people that pass on knowledge, right? There are teachers who are like, and no offense, Atlas, is just, but you're just regurgitating what you're told to tell the students, like that you are hobbled as a teacher. Whereas then there are people who are educators, and you're like, those are people who are at the forefront of knowledge, trying to learn and be like, oh, you guys got to learn the new thing. It's very important. You're like, those aren't the same, right?
No.
Like, and it's the same thing, like somebody someone who has a doctorate and someone who's a doctor. You're like, yes, you both have doctorates. That's fine. But one of you saves lives. The other one makes spreadsheets. It's not those. They're not the same thing. Right. So it's a weird, but that's the thing, is like, I would love to get people more involved in like that idea of knowledge. Like, I remember for like growing up, we would always have like dinner parties and stuff, and my parents would invite over tons of people because we're Greek. We were like, yeah, you should come, be Greek with us. It is very good. You'll enjoy it. It's the best, but then it would always devolve after food, maybe some dancing, because Greeks are crazy. But then it would devolve into like conversations like, well, how does that affect you? I don't think that's right. And it would go back and forth very loud. And all of a sudden, like, my mom would just appear and be like, why is everyone shouting? Stop shouting in my house. And you're like, we're just communicating. We're just loud. That's, but like that idea of exchanging knowledge by conversation and be like, well, I heard this and this. And you're going, this was before you could whip out your phone and be like, here, let me show you how stupid you are.
Yeah.
You are an idiot. You had somebody's older brother coming and goes like, well, I could tell you guys something. You're like, you don't know shit. Which was very enjoyable. But like
the proto Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well,
there was one in every family.
Of course. and then you have to learn how to bring them down from their high horse. It was one of my brother. I have a brother who's 2 years older than me, who for my parents, they were like, oh, he's the one, he flunked out of university, he was a piece of shit, and he died. And I'm like, and people are like, oh, your brother died. I'm like, nah, he was an asshole. Don't worry about it. I'm like, the world's better off. His wife's a bitch. It's fine. But you're like, that's why I'm like, you can't rely on this. You have to have dialogue. And I feel like books are like the building blocks of being able to have a dialogue like that, right? Like just to experience, like to see something as an outsider and observe how someone else's thought process goes through it. You're like, that's a huge thing, right? Because then you understand, you're like, oh, it's not just me. You're like, no, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Nick wanted to fuck the McKees in that weird apartment.
It's like, it's like, you know what? He might need somebody to explain some things to him. It's like, here's what. But so I do have a question, like tangential to, your point about like the kind of incentive to read, or like what motivates people to read. And like, I know I grew up with like programs in school that were like designed to get you to read more. And this might be generational, but I know like when I was younger, when I was younger, we had Book It, which was Atlas. Did you do Book It? I feel like we're closer in age, probably. Okay, so Book It was a program that Pizza Hut had that would like work with your classroom. So like every 5 books, 10 books, what have you, you got to go get pizza.
Yeah, you got a free personalized pizza, and you know what? You had to buy a full pizza. My dad was like, "Son of a bitch." He's like, "Fine, we'll go." And he was like, "We're never doing this again. Just stop reading. Read the Bible instead." I was like,
so we had the opposite because I was a reader, but my sister wasn't. So they were like, if this is going to get her to read, let's do it. And that's how we were husky, well-read children. And then, but then later in elementary school, we had accelerated reader, which was like these tests that you would do on computers, because we had just gotten computer labs, and they're like, what can we do to get them in computer labs? So you would read books, and there's like a 5 or 10 question multiple choice test, and if you passed it, you got points for that book, and then the folks that had the most points at the end of the year also got to go to a pizza party. Basically, they're just like,
that was in place by the time I was in school.
Okay, so I did that. Was like top reader multiple times, mostly because like one year I was like close but not quite the top, but then the following year they added the Babysitter's Club books, and I was like, it's over for you hoes. So there were mechanisms
that like, children, baby.
Exactly. So there were like mechanisms in place to like incentivize folks to read. Did we have readathon? Yes. I bankrupted many of my parents' friends because they're like, surely she's not reading that fast. And my mom would like try to test me and was like, you didn't read that. And I was like, yes, I did.
Victoria said, I scammed my aunt by paying $3 a book and got 100 books.
Yeah. Same. Also a scammer. That was my brand of grift. But I was reading is the thing. So everybody
what was
they can't punish you for it. They're like, more money? God damn it. And they're like, I read more books.
Yeah, I'm like, you want me to read or not? I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
Were there any books you read in like elementary school that had a big impact on you? Like the novels that they, like kids novels they made you read?
Okay, yes. So I do have one. I was an early reader because my dad's a professor and my parents are nerds. But that also meant I was awful at story time. Because like the pace that they read at story time is a lot slower than I would read. So I just got really bored. So I remember in kindergarten just getting up and walking around. And my teacher's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I was like, can I just read it? Like, can you just let me read it? So she gave it to me. It's on my shelf. Actually, let me grab it. I'll be right back. But I still have that book. 1 second.
Well, while she's doing that, I'll cut in with mine real quick. Because like The Hatchet by Gary Paulson is something I still remember.
Yeah.
I'll finish the rest when she's done. So wait, what's this book that?
Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume.
Oh, Judy Blume.
This is the copy that my kindergarten teacher gave me. So it's like it's old, it's frayed. I've had it for undisclosed number of years. But yeah, she let me take it home because I was like, can I just read it? So this is my first chapter book.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that was so Emma, you remind me of a close friend of mine. I've known her since grade 2, which is basically like 900 years from now. But like she was the same way. So even when we were in high school, the English teachers would give her a special tasks. So it's like, okay, you have to actually read 6 books. And they're like, she's like, everybody else is reading 4. They're like, you're going to be done in a week. She's like, that is also true. She's the kind of person that reads a book, like a novel in an afternoon. And it bothers the shit out of me because I'm like,
too, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the fact that I'm still bigger than you. So that's fine. I just got to put you on my shoulder and be like, read. Tell me, give me a synopsis. Yeah, that's fine. That's good. So I have plans. It's fine. No, but it's one of those things where you're like, that's a very different skill, right? Like, because I'm a slow reader and it drives my wife absolutely crazy. Because did you read Enid Blyton's books? I don't know who that is. See, I'm not a reader.
I know of those books, but I didn't read them. Although I will say, I just did the Anne of Green Gables books like 2 years ago, and I was like, I would have loved these as a kid. I should have done that, but didn't happen at the time.
My sister was definitely more of the reader in my family, but the 2 books that really like stuck in my craw was Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, the woman who did The Giver.
Yeah.
But because the reason why was after 4th grade, in the summer, my family went on a trip to DC and we saw the Holocaust Museum, and it was a really like somber moment. My dad's side's Jewish, and like he really like sat us down and explained the gravity of the situation and what it all meant, and seeing the room with the shoes like broke me and all that stuff. We come back for 5th grade, and that's the book we read, where it's about this family and their next door neighbors are Jewish, and most of them flee, but they take the daughter in as like a cover, and then they got to keep them safe from the Nazis. So like those 2 experiences, like I still remember the cover of that book to this day, and I think I need to reread it because it's been about 20 years by now. And then the other big one was Gary Paulson's The Hatchet.
Oh my God, Hatchet! Yeah. Everyone and Hatchet, yes.
In like 6th grade, everybody fucking reads The Hatchet.
Everybody reads Hatchet, yeah.
Except for Dino for some reason.
No, I only started reading, like I only read books because I had to, and that was probably in high school. Where I was like I read The Outsiders and I'm like, this book is stupid. I'll watch the movie. I don't care.
See, I love The Outsiders, but I hated the movie.
Okay,
and
but that's because the movie sucks. Okay,
the movie did suck.
Yeah, it wasn't accurate at all. It was it was the worst part about the movie was you're like, it's the same with Gremlins 2. You're like, that's not what happens in the book. I don't like this anymore. Yeah. It's very frustrating. Right?
Loved the movie, hated the book. Oh God.
Hey, Randy.
I have no idea why The Hatchet like was so interesting to me. Like I even read the like sequel books that he wrote.
Yeah.
It's like he gets challenged to do it again with a cameraman, then the cameraman dies and he's got to like do it all again. I'm like, that just doesn't have
I don't know why they do Hatchet. Just let them do Into the Wild. Like just do Into the Wild.
They should probably. I guess it is like Baby Into the Wild.
Yeah, it's Into the Wild Junior.
Yeah. Because like at the beginning there's the thing where he's on the plane going to visit his dad, and the pilot's like, hey, there's a survival kit in the back here, and then that becomes like the Chekhov's gun.
Case.
Yeah, it becomes like the Chekhov's gun of the whole book, but he doesn't remember. Because I remember we're going through the chapters and he's like, okay, I made a shelter, I found these berries that made me vomit, I found these other berries, I'm okay, I learned how to cook, blah blah blah. And every single chapter we were going, why doesn't he go get the survival kit? All the way through. And then he finally remembers, and then we're like, finally. And then the book ends.
God. I feel like there's a few books, though, that, like, even teachers were like, yeah, we have to read this. Sorry. Like, just...
Sorry.
It's going to be horrible, but you're just going to have to. It's part of the curriculum. And you're like, why don't we change the curriculum? Be like, I'm not. Yeah. Every teacher that I've talked to, I feel like all my teachers were a little bit too old, and there's like, no, I don't care anymore. And you're like, well, that's not helpful at all. It's just but
no, I'm happy that we're doing Snow Crash this year just because it is so fucking funny. Viewer / listener, go give it a try, because like there's lots of cursing, and the narrator is just completely out of pocket the entire time. And I'm so surprised that my school was just like, yeah, let's order a bunch of copies of Snow Crash. I'm like, you guys didn't read the book, did you?
You guys keep on mentioning books, and I'm like, I don't know what that's about, but I'm like, I'm Googling it on the side on another screen.
Yeah.
Like,
One that
seems interesting.
one that I'm hoping makes it into kind of like, if we're gonna continue doing dystopia, as like an ongoing theme, one that I'm hoping like makes it into that canon is Mickey 7, which Mickey 17 that's coming out is based on.
Oh, yeah.
I read it earlier this year. It's quite good, and it's got like some really interesting, important, we'll say relevant stuff about billionaires in space.
Oh, yeah.
So, so if folks are getting ready to go see the movie, and this is new to me, like being excited for a Robert Pattinson movie because I wasn't a Twilight girl because I read actual books. So like that was a whole thing where I was like, nope, didn't get it. But Mickey 7 is really, really good, and I'm even more excited for the movie than I was before.
Yeah,
I'll give it a shot because, like, one of my students recommended Unwind to me, which is another dystopia book that I completely just missed the bus on for whatever reason. But yeah, I gotta check that out because, like, I was looking at the little blurb at the beginning, like, here's what the book is about. And I'm like, that's kind of neat. I'll give it a shot. But is it Mickey 7 or Mickey 17? Because I know the movie's Mickey 7.
The book is 7, the movie is 17 because Bong Joon-ho was like, I want to kill Robert Pattinson 10 more times. That's literally the reasoning he gave.
That's so funny.
It's very reasonable.
17 is a funnier number.
Robert Pattinson,
I think so.
But also Robert Pattinson's greatest part to date has been Cedric Diggory, where he dies. So
okay,
he's a great dyer. Not on me.
He was great in Boy in the Heron in the dub. He was really good in that.
That's not him. He's just saying words. Come on, man.
Okay, so Dino, my beef with Robert Pattinson started with Cedric Diggory because I don't know if everybody does this, but I cast things in my head as to like who should play that character. Sure. So Jamie Bell from Billy Elliot, he was just in All of Us Strangers, any number of other things. I was like, he's Cedric Diggory. He's Cedric Diggory. Like the whole time I was reading it, it's my favorite book. And then they're like, Robert Pattinson, Cedric Diggory. And I was like, no, he isn't. And yeah, so it was never going to work for me.
I got to find it. Hold on.
I don't know. I think I had a more vitriolic hate.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
When
he's Cedric, right? Yeah, he's Cedric Diggory. And then they were like, oh, now he's in everything. I was like, he shouldn't even have had it to begin with.
No, I have a friend who loves Robert Pattinson because of the Twilight movies. And I'm like, you have too much stalker in your blood. You need to figure that out. Because she's like, he's so, like, it's gross. Just please
and
stop.
I have that energy about other people. Like,
sure, but not him.
Right.
He's a great dyer, not a great thespian. It's different.
So Mickey 17 will be his greatest role.
Yeah. Oh no, me and my wife are excited. We actually want to go with that friend who loves him, just to watch her cry a little bit. It'll be fun.
Just to watch him get killed 10 more times.
Yeah.
Stephen Yeun's going to be there. I'm excited. I love him.
Yeah. I mean, like, I really loved Parasite, and I've the last few like black comedies that I've seen have just been fantastic. Like, did you see Companion?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I've been told I need to. Yeah, that's
fantastic movie. Because like the trailer makes it look like a slasher movie, which is what Katie was excited for. And then we got there, I was like, oh my god, it's an allegory for domestic abuse.
Yeah, like I'm not a horror
this
person.
Is great.
Yeah, I'm not a horror person. Then my friend's like, oh, it's not that, and I was like, great, now I can go, which is nice because I like Jack Quaid. So I was like, let me get into it.
Yeah,
I prefer horror.
It's fantastic. I'm trying to get the more like Andrew Tate-y type kids in my class to be like, you should go see it because it's a slasher movie, and I'm hoping to like, plant the seed to get them to be less terrible.
How many of them are there? That sounds awful.
Like 4.
They're just teenagers. They'll learn how retarded they are. It's fine. They'll figure it out. It's your job as an adolescent is just to be as dumb as humanly possible, so you can learn as much as possible. So that in your 20s you can be less dumb, just a little bit, not much. Because listen, it's that whole idea when especially boys, they turn 18, they're like, I'm a man. You're like, you still pee your pants. Let's calm down.
I also need to see Novocaine, which also has Jack Quaid in it.
Yeah,
but that's not out yet.
Not yet.
Oh, but that's going to be really good.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that premise hasn't been done yet. That feels so. Yeah. I would watch it for that reason.
Yeah, for Mickey 17, for him to die a few times. I feel like it'd be enjoyable because I saw him in the Lighthouse. He did great, but also died. And I'm like, it's very important that Robert Pattinson dies.
Sean Bean.
Yeah, he's like Sean Bean 2.0 because he lasts a lot longer, but he still has to die. It's just, he would have
Ned Stark
lasted to the
lasted,
two
what,
towers.
10 episodes before they kill him, right?
I mean, at
In
least
Game of Thrones? Yeah.
that's fine.
Um,
Listen, it's just one of those things. But
So yeah, I guess now would be the time to ask the comment section. What was the best or worst book that you read in elementary, middle, high school? Because not everyone reads the same books. I didn't even Moby Dick, fucking Taming of the Shrew, and Midsummer Night's Dream. None of those have stories well enough to talk about. So please tell us yours in the comments.
or let us know if you're like me and you can't read. That's fine. There is also that list of like 100 books to read before you die. And I'm like,
yeah.
you know what? I looked at a few of them and I'm like, I read a few of those, not many, but still, I'm like, all right, let's check it out. Like, I still have to read Man in the Sea.
Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah, Old Man in the Sea,
Yeah.
which I'm like, my buddy was like, you'll love it. And I'm like, will I? Because I feel like you're making, I talk smart. I'm not actually smart. I just sound intelligent and confident. It's all
I like the the book, but then South Park ruined it for me because there's that episode where Miss Garrison gets all mad at them and like, okay, you have to read this book and do a book report next class, and then they hire Mexicans to do it for them. So they come into the class and it'd be like, he get in the boat and you go to catch the fish.
And that's why I love South Park. That's it.
Well, and then we don't have time for it, obviously, but there's like a whole conversation to be had about like how popular culture like affected how we read those books. Because I know I was in high school reading Shakespeare around the time when like Hollywood was like, oh, we're gonna make it cool. So like 10 Things I Hate About You was Taming of the Shrew, or Oh, was Othello. And like, so I was reading those things in tandem with there then being like a movie about it. So like there was the attraction of being able to compare those, and there's less of that now, I think.
Yeah. There's barely any of it.
Or it's different. It's different in the sense like a lot of things are adapted from IP, but those wouldn't be things that you were reading in school.
I think the frustrating part is that if somebody does adapt a book, it usually has zero budget, and then you're like, and then they do a poor job, and you're like, okay, can we not get somebody who does good? Easy for You to Say by Jay. I don't know what that is. Do you guys know what that book is?
Nope.
I've never read that one.
I mean,
I haven't either.
I'm older than I look, though, so who knows?
I mean, listen, it's all right. That's fair. I am aging like milk, so that's fine.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Emma, thank you so much for coming on Generation Dan.
My pleasure. Where
can people find and follow you and all that good stuff?
I am on Instagram and YouTube at Amma Marfo, and on Blue Sky at ammamarfo.bsky.social or whatever that is. I have a half-hour special on YouTube called Enjoy Your Nachos, and we'll go wherever you want me to do comedy.
Nice.
All right. You can follow us at Generation Dan on Blue Sky, on Instagram, or on YouTube, which you might be watching this there. If so, leave a like, leave a comment, tell a friend, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can follow me at Atlas Novak wherever fine social medias are found, except for Twitter. I nuked that shit from orbit. Or check out my other my other YouTube show, Nexus at Night, which is about the card fight Vanguard. If that's not your bag, go fuck yourself. Dino?
Basically. All right. So Nick said that book, Easy for You to Say, is a story about a child overcoming stuttering. I would make fun of that book relentlessly because I'm a bad person.
Now I'm just imagining you watching the King's speech being like, he's stuttering.
I laughed my dick off. It was hilarious. I was like, look, it's all in his head. It's great. It's a fucking hilarious story. Listen, okay. So everyone, you can follow me, Dino the Genetic Marvel. I go live all the time. I'm also trying to build more Lego because, I'm possibly autistic. I don't know. I got something. I got a little sprinkling of something, but come check me out. We have Life of Giants tomorrow. We also have motherfucking Monday on Upside Down Studio. So check that out. That's going to be usually in the afternoon of Monday. But make sure you subscribe and like everything, and we'll be back for more. It's very exciting. We have all sorts of things going on. I guess that's it. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Wonderful. Have a great rest of your day, Sunday. Rest of your Sunday, everyone, because those are words. Bye.
Bye.